All right. I would like to call the Finance, Ways and Means Subcommittee to order for April 28th, 2021. Madam Clerk, please take the roll.
Representatives Baum. Here. Camper. Freeman. Gant. Hawk. Here. Hazelwood. Here. Lynn. Here. Ogles. Todd. Here. Whitson. Here. Williams. Here. Wendell. Here. Chairman Hicks.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Members, any announcements or personal orders before we begin today? Seeing none, we have the appropriations calendar up today. The first item is the appropriations bill, which will include the legislative amendment to the budget. And just some things to note, the document for the legislative amendment will be posted on dashboard for members and on the General Assembly website for the public. For those that are accessing the document on the General Assembly website, please refer to the House Committees tab, which includes a proposed amendments button. So any questions from the committee on that? Seeing none, we are now on item number one. Item number one is House Bill 1153 by Chairlady Hazelwood. You have a motion and a second. You're recognized on House Bill 1153. Looks like, Chairlady, we have an amendment drafting code 7834. Is that correct?
That is correct, Mr. Chairman.
We have a motion and a second on the amendment. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, we're now voting on the amendment. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. Amendment 1 goes on. We're on amendment number 2, drafting code 4242. Is there a motion on the amendment? We have a motion and a second. Chairlady Hazelwood, you recognized on the amendment. Any discussion on the amendment? Members, let me back up. We're going to get these amendments on, then talk about the bill. I don't know why I've directed to Chairlady Hazelwood, but we'll get going here in just a second. All right, so any discussion? Seeing none, we're now voting on amendment drafting code 4242. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. Amendment 2 goes on. That brings us to amendment number 3, drafting code 4567. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, we're now voting on amendment 4567 going on House Bill 1153. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. We are back on the bill as amended, and you are recognized, Chairlady Hazelwood.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And as you said, this is the budget bill. We have numerous sections, and we can, I think everyone, as you've mentioned, has access to a copy of the bill online. So I'll just hit the highlights. The amendments that we've just put on adds Section 58. There's additions to the budget. Those are additional appropriations, departmental revenue, and positions. 59 is legislation, and those are where you'll find funding for new proposals from the legislature. Section 60 is the base and cost increase reductions, and there's where you'll find things that have changed from the previous base budget and the cost increases that are now recommended to be reduced. And Section 61 is additional proposed supplemental appropriations. 62 is capital outlay provisions, and that recommends the supplemental new. And then where we, in some places, we added new capital expenditures, and other places we reduced those. So that's where you'll find that. We have capital outlay and major maintenance in Section 2, and there's earmarked funds that are carried forward in general services capital planning budget for 2 ongoing projects. And if you'll recall, we have a significant investment in deferred maintenance in this budget. Departmental revenues, there's corrects the departmental budget total, and we have earmarked appropriations in Section 7. Section 9 is just where we have some sufficient appropriations from the departmental revenues. We have 2 new items there for merchandise sales at the Department of Ag Spaces and donations to the Department of Education Commission on Education Recovery and Innovation. Section 13 is the Board of Claims, Property Insurance and Risk Management. That's where we transfer appropriations from the state treasurer to a new state captive insurance company. I believe, Chairman Hicks, that might have been your bill. Section 29 deals with higher ed. That's capital outlay from school bonds and institutional sources, and it also has the list of additional capital outlay projects. Those are UT, in both the UT and TBR systems, as well as the LGIs, the locally governed institutions, the 4-year schools. And Section 29 also has authorizes transfer of the balance of a closed scholarship program to TSAC reserves, and it declares legislative intent for UT to acquire and assume operations of Martin Methodist College. That's something that's received a great deal of conversation in this committee and in others. In Section 36, carry forward and appropriations of certain unexpended balances, and we have some new carry forwards there for the Attorney General's oversight of the state health plan, and we have in Section 39 program expansions, and those are there's a separate report that was furnished to General Assembly with these expansions. In Section 43, over appropriations, those are where we're going to get reversion dollars back to the general fund, and it amends the projected over appropriations for fiscal years 2020, 2021. It updates the amount of motor vehicle taxes that are earmarked for license plates. I'm excited. I hope you all are. We're finally going to get a new license plate for our cars in Tennessee. And we also transferring funds from the general fund to the K through 12 Mental Health Trust Fund. And that's, again, something that's received a lot of conversation here in the media and other places, and something that is, we feel will really be a boon to the state of Tennessee, and particularly to our children as they deal with not only the mental health issues related to COVID, but just social media and all of the things that impact their lives. In sections 47, we have the revenue fluctuation reserve, and that updates the total deposit to the rainy day fund. We will be depositing in the governor's original proposed budget. There was a $50 million deposit to the rainy day fund. We've upped that by another $50 million. We will be depositing $100 million into that rainy day fund, the state's savings account. So with that, Mr. Chairman.
All right, Chair Lady, thank you for that very thorough description. Members, you've heard the description of House Bill 1153 as amended. Any discussion? Leader Camper.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for your brief discussion on the proposed bill and the amendments to it. I have a question on some of the adjustments to the governor's budget proposed amendment. In the schedule, it appears that the broadband grants has been reduced and the grants to local government have been reduced. Can you talk about those, or talk about the philosophy of reducing those, and kind of explain to us what's happening with that?
Chair Lady Hazelwood.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And yes, Leader Camper, I'll be happy to do that. We're able to do some, I think, great fiscally responsible things for the state because of reallocating some of those dollars that you mentioned. The broadband, in the governor's original proposal, there was $200 million to be spent on broadband in the coming year. There's been a lot of discussion about how much of that can be spent and spent wisely in that amount of time. There's also the issue of the, since the governor's proposal, and I think it's worth noting, that's one of the reasons for some of the major changes in this budget. Since the governor's original proposal, there have been allocations of very large sums of money from the federal government that will be coming into the state. Some of those allocations can be used for things that we were planning to spend state dollars on. So we have $100 million in this year's budget for broadband. In addition to that, there will be significant federal funding that can be used for that. We are still planning to, we will spend the $200 million, assuming it's still needed after the federal funds. We will have $100 million in this budget, and we plan to have $100 million in next year's budget for broadband. So it's just a matter of spreading the expenditures out, so I think we can be more thoughtful about it and hopefully more effective. And I want to go on record as saying ECD is in the process of contracting for mapping, like door-to-door mapping, so we know exactly where we do and don't have broadband and at what level. And I think giving us an opportunity to get that study and then utilizing it to make sure that we are allocating dollars to the proper places and to the proper technology. On the city and counties, that's the local government piece you mentioned. Again, there was $200 million in the governor's original proposal. Since that time, the cities and the counties will have now found out, we have we know and they know that they will be receiving significant federal dollars for their use. What we don't know at this point is how those federal dollars, what sort of strings will be attached to them, what kind of things that they will be able to be used for. So what we have done is, instead of giving the cities and the counties $200 million this year from the state budget, we're changing that to $100 million. We're going to give it to them right away in July, and we will have no strings on our dollars. So they can use those for the things that the federal dollars cannot be utilized for. They'll have access to them right away. The governor's proposal is going to hold those dollars until January, and there were going to be some strings attached. So we've cut the strings, and we've allocated the monies to them as soon as the next year's budget kicks in. Again, the plan will be, if needed, depending again on the federal dollars that come down and how they can be used, the plan would be that in next year's budget, we would do $100 million again for local governments, cities and counties. As a cheap person and someone who is concerned about the state's frugal, thank you, that's a much better word, thank you. One of the things I would like to go on record, again, a concern that I have, I don't want our cities and counties to become dependent on these dollars from the state. We have provided those monies last year. We're providing them this year. We're talking about providing them next year. But it's something that we need to make sure that local governments understand these dollars are to be used for non-recurring expenses. They are not to be used for recurring expenses. And because the state, we're not going to always be in this position to have such large asks. So just a word of caution to those who are going to be receiving the checks. So did that answer your question, Leader Camper?
Thank you, Chair Lady. Leader Camper?
It did, and Madam Chair, I understand your concern of wanting to be frugal, but we've also come through a pandemic, so I think, I'm not saying that, the locals are going to become dependent on these funds, and I understand your rationale a little more now, but we did just come through a pandemic and still on the road to recovery from that. So I would hope that that $100 million is held in abeyance, as I'm hearing what you're saying, that if it is still a need next year, those funds will still be made available if we found ourselves in a situation where they may still need to have access to those dollars. Is that what I think I heard you say about the cities and counties?
Chair Lady Hazelwood?
Exactly, Leader Camper. The plan is to have those dollars available for the cities and the counties next year. Again, that would be dependent on how much funding they have received from the feds and from the federal government, and how much, what their remaining needs might be in terms of, how those federal dollars were, what buckets and boxes, what constraints were put upon them. But our plan would be, again, my only other comment was that if we do that, that will be 3 years that we have put that sort of money into cities and counties. And I just want to raise my hand and raise the flag and say, this has been 3 years, but it's not an ongoing process. So none of these monies need to be put into recurring buckets in local governments. And I would say, we're going to hear from the comptroller later today, but I'm told some of our cities and some of our counties, the amount of money that it's coming down from the federal government, there's a cap. As I understand it, they can only receive 75% of their annual budget, but many of our cities and counties are receiving that kind of money. So again, what we all want to be sure is that the monies that are coming in from whatever sources, from the state, from the federal government, from our own sales tax revenues and other revenues, we just want to make sure that we use those in the way that best positions the state going forward.
Leader Camper?
Thank you. I appreciate that, Madam Chair. And there was also a reduction on the sales tax holiday. Now, does that include both for food and the restaurants that we cut it in half?
That is correct. There's now $50 million sales tax holiday for, I believe it's going to be split 75% for restaurants. Again,
Okay.
what we're attempting to do is to help those businesses that have been hardest hit by the pandemic, and I think restaurants and tourism are, definitely fit that category. So 75% of that 50 million will be going towards sales tax relief related to restaurants. The other 25% will be on food. In addition to that, there's some legislation that will be moving through that will, we will have a 1-year moratorium on sales tax on gun safes and safety equipment, like gun locks, small safes, whatever. For this coming fiscal year, we will have a sales tax relief on that, and the locals will be held harmless on all of these sales tax holiday type things.
Leader Camper.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair, for that explanation. And one other question that has to do with the original base budget as proposed before the amendment in section 35, item 11. There's a section in this in the base budget that I hadn't seen this language before, so I'm curious if you have any idea what your thoughts are on this. It says for non-public education choice programs, a reallocation of funds between the Department of Education and miscellaneous appropriations is authorized. The Commissioner of Finance and Administration is further authorized to adjust departmental revenues as may be required. So I'm wondering, are we authorizing funds that was appropriated a couple years back for the Ed Choice program, which was, was a lawsuit filed and it was caught up in a lawsuit and all that. Are we now authorizing the department to reallocate those funds both in and out of that money and do some miscellaneous appropriations that may or may not come back before this body? Are you familiar with this portion of it? Or is it someone from the department or somebody can talk about that particular line item in the budget?
Chair Lady Hazelwood.
Leader Camper, I'm going to have to refer to my brain trust because right off the top of my head, I'm not familiar with that item. So if you
That's
will
fine.
just give me a minute.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Chairman, if we could, I think we have David Thurman is in the office, and he probably is going to be better equipped to dig down into that if we could go out of session and hear from him.
Okay, we'll ask Mr. Thurman to come on up. Without objection, we're going to go out of session. So without objection, out of session. And Mr. Thurman, you know the drill, certainly, so.
Hi, David Thurman, Budget Director for the Department of Finance Administration. Could you repeat the section that you're looking at?
Excuse me. Thank you. And thank you for comment. It's in section 35, item 11. And the language is talking about the non-public education choice program. It's on page 52 of the original document. If you have the original bill, it's on page 52. I'm 92, 90. Sorry.
3511?
Yes. Yeah, certified, yes.
Yes, so we have an appropriation currently for the ESA program. There's, I guess, we haven't started enrollment yet, and so we're not sure exactly what the appropriation requirement is going to be for until we have enrollment. And so what we want to do is we've funded to have an appropriation, but if the appropriation requirement is greater than what's in the appropriated for that program, we added authority to transfer funds from miscellaneous to fully fund our commitment once we know enrollment. So it's kind of a backstop to make sure that we have the funding necessary to fully fund whatever the impact of enrollment is on the program.
Leader Camper.
Thank you, and thank you for the explanation. So, for the record, it is to establish what we believe is maybe a base number of students that may enroll, and if it goes over that number, you want the authorization to move money from some miscellaneous pots, basically, to fill in for student enrollment.
That's correct.
So does this language also authorize you to move funds out of that pot of money to some other miscellaneous pot for the record?
No, it does not. It's just from miscellaneous to this particular program for this issue only.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Thurman. I appreciate it.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Thurman. Thank you. Without objection, we're going to go back in session. And that brings us to Chairman Todd. You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity to discuss these details. A couple of things that I would point out as well. One concern that I have immediately is eliminating the reduction in the professional privilege tax. I mean, we're all getting input from our constituents that this is a very high priority to eliminate this very unfair tax on certain professions in our state. It's not a privilege to do business in this state. It's a right. And I'm disappointed that this has not been a full elimination. It wasn't proposed to be. And I certainly wish that we had had the opportunity to do that in this budget. The other point I want to make is I'm actually glad to see the reduction in the broadband grant. I was very concerned, and I'm still concerned, about how much money we're going to be putting into a system that is about to be outdated. Most in this General Assembly do not realize what we're about to see in this state, and that's going to be 100% coverage for broadband, internet, and with the speeds similar to and soon to exceed what fiber can provide. Every home in this state is about to have it this year without us putting one dime of money into it. So I've talked with, and Chairman Zachary and I have talked with the Economic Community Development folks to make sure they know about this. I even encourage them to look at using some of these grants to supplement some of the equipment for that. One company is going to be offering that, or you can already sign up for it right now. It's not turned on yet, but it'll be later this year, probably this summer. And I would encourage the use of this money, some of this money at least, to supplement the equipment that individuals can purchase for that, instead of supplementing running wires all around the country, which I think most on this committee know there's not enough money printed to put a wire to every home in this state with fiber right now. There's not enough money, and the ROI on that would be ridiculous. So let's utilize the technology that's already out there, and I look forward to hopefully ECD changing some of the rules around this money, unless we need to make that change, so that that can be utilized for those purposes and be the most efficient use of this money. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman Todd. Leader Gant, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to kind of echo a little bit about what my colleague, Representative Todd, was mentioning about the professional privilege tax, and I just want to make a statement that I look forward to working with our speaker and the governor over the summer, and hopefully, you know, our original intent was to, I've talked to Chair Lady Hazelwood, and she concurs that we've got to look at, you know, being more effective in what we're doing with the professional privilege tax instead of, you know, these smaller amounts. And, you know, we've got to do it in the right way that justifies the taxpayers. But I do look forward to working on that this summer along with Chris Todd and, pushing to eliminate the professional privilege tax in a complete repeal that makes sense. So, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Leader Gant. Further discussion? Seeing none, we are now voting on House Bill 1153, moving on to full finance. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. House Bill 1153 moves to full finance. All right, members, that brings us to item number 2. But before we go to item number 2, I'm going to take a point of privilege here. I've got a special guest in the audience. He is a former constituent of mine. And we've got Mr. Pearson Harrison back there. Pearson, if you'll stand up. Pearson is 11 years old. He and my oldest daughter are pretty much the same age, and I don't know if he wants me to admit it or not, but he is the youngest son of Mike Harrison. So, Pearson, it's good to have you here. Thank you. All right, members, that brings us to item number 2 on our calendar. That's House Bill 1151 by Chair Lady Hazelwood. You have a motion and a second. You are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This just increases the amount by which state appropriations from state tax revenues for next fiscal year may exceed the index of estimated growth in the state's economy, and that's by $431,600,000, and that's 2.37%, and there are no amendments.
All right, thank you very much. Members, you've heard the description of House Bill 1151. Any discussion on House Bill 1151? Seeing none, we're now voting on House Bill 1151, moving on to full finance. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. House Bill 1151 moves to full finance. That brings us to item number 3 on our calendar. Item number 3 on our calendar is House Bill 1154 by Chair Lady Hazelwood. Do we have a motion and a second? We have a motion and a second on House Bill 1154. It looks like we also have an Amendment 1 Drafting Code 7321. This amendment will be withdrawn. That brings us to Amendment number 2, Drafting Code 7813. We have a motion and a second. We're going to get these on again. Let me just put us in the proper posture. We're going to put these amendments on, and then we will come back and discuss the bill as amended. So that is, again, Drafting Code 7813. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor of 7813 going on to House Bill 1154, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. Amendment goes on. I think that is the final one. So now we are on House Bill 1154 as amended. Chair Lady Hazelwood, you're recognized.
This is the budget implementation bill, and it makes the changes that are to permanent law that are necessary to implement the enacted budget. So we talked about the budget before. This provides the language to put that in statute. The Section 1, one of the things that Leader Camper had alluded to earlier, it enacts a sales tax holiday on groceries July 1 to July 14, and food for retail sale October 1 to October 14. And I'm sorry, the dates, I have new dates. Okay, the retail sale of food and food ingredients is for 1 week, and it's between Friday, July 30th and Thursday, August the 5th. And prepared food are the same dates. So, and those will be a week each.
All right, thank you, Chair Lady. Members, you've heard the description of House Bill 1154. Any discussion? Question has been called on the bill? Yeah, we're on the bill. Question's been called on the bill. Any objection to the calling of the question? Hearing none, seeing none, we're now voting on House Bill 1154, moving on to full finance. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. House Bill 1154 to full finance. Brings us to item number 4. Item number 4 on our calendar is House Bill 1152 by Chair Lady Hazelwood. Is there a motion to second? Motion. We have a motion to second. Chair Lady, you are recognized for House Bill 1152.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is just a bill. We pass it every year. It authorizes the state to issue and sell bonds up to $126 million. We don't have any plans in this budget to do so, but this is backup should the bottom fall out, should there something happen that we need to do this. This will allow the state to issue bonds up to that level. With that explanation, Mr. Chairman, I would renew the motion.
All right, thank you very much. Members, any discussion on House Bill 1152? Chairman Hawk, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members, and Chair Lady Hazelwood, thank you very much. I go back to where we were this time last year and know that we did have to dip in and had to issue some bonds last year. I was frustrated by doing it that time because I felt like we could go forward without that, but the statement that you just made that no new debt is going into the state of Tennessee is very important, and I don't want that just to gloss over people. That is critically important, how we're paying our bills and paying as we go. So thank you for this and your statement that we are not issuing any bonds or have no plans at this moment to issue any bonds. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members.
Thank you, Chairman Hogg. Further discussion? Seeing none, we're now voting on House Bill 1152, moving on to full finance. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. House Bill 1152 moves to full finance. All right, members, that completes our calendar for today. The appropriations calendar will be considered in the full finance committee immediately following this meeting. So do we have any further business coming before the committee? I see none, so we stand in recess.